Welcome to the Startup Grind.
For those who don't know Philip, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's say you have Stepping Stone and Testmyapp. First, Stepping Stone. What are you doing with Stepping Stone, or what is it? Let's call it that, like that.
So, thank you, first of all. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the turnout. So, Stepping Stone started 3 years ago, almost to the date. It started out of, let's say, necessity, because I was constantly introducing companies to each other. So it's only in the B2B environment. I spent a lot of my previous time introducing people and actually bringing business from one to the other, connecting people, because business is just about that. Business is only about people who know people and who can do each other favors, and then after a while it turns into cash at some point down the line.
Yeah, some invoices which are paid, hopefully.
Yeah, invoices are nice when they get sent out. They're not as nice when they come in, but that's...
But the aim is to send invoices.
Yeah. We like it. And so, so three years ago, I was essentially the connector, and that's how it started out. And one of the things that I really appreciated over these 3 years is the ability to meet people that were not only like-minded, but also that had a completely different worldview. And in doing so, that's actually how I met one of the guys that I ended up starting another company with. Subsequently, I've left that company because we parted ways, which are things that happen from time to time.
Well, it's like life, and
exactly.
It's human. It's a human business.
Yeah, exactly, and that actually brings me to exactly the right point. During the phase where we were creating this application, he was in charge of the technology, and I was in charge of going out and finding not only customers but also finding out what the customers wanted. And I looked around for maybe a company or a network or somebody that could actually help me get in front of my target market. And as a startup, I couldn't necessarily pay for let's say expansive events and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, well, why don't I do it myself? So Testmyapp was really born out of necessity. Okay. And in the end, what ended up happening is that I organized these events for me, for the application, and I would basically buy a few beers and I would buy a few crisps, and we would sit around a table and I would present what we had done until then. And
in the beginning, I mean, if you say Testmyapp, it was for your own needs and so on. What was the format? Was it really how did you get the people together to test it? I guess it was not only the beers.
I think you'd be surprised to learn that I think it probably was in the beginning, to be honest. But what happened was that as I did 1 and then 2 and then 3 for myself, I ended up having other entrepreneurs that came and saw me and said, well, actually, I'd quite like you to organize one for me. And I thought, well, okay, fine, fair enough. We'll buy a few beers, we'll buy a few crisps, and we'll sit around, and instead of talking about my application, we'll talk about yours.
But how does it work? How can one imagine such an event? Let's say your very first event you did for yourself. How did you go about it? I mean, the event itself, it's not getting the people, but the event itself, and then how did it evolve to, let's say, the first external company coming to you?
So the very, very first event, I actually printed out all of the different screens, and I laid them out. And by laying them out, I got a good idea of how, from one screen to the other, you could actually transition. You can do this with mock-up tools on the internet, of course, but we actually, by printing them out, we got a good idea of what the customer journey was going to be. And I would stand around with people and we would go through the different screens, and I would basically ask, what do you like? What what do you not like? And after a while, there started to be patterns, and I thought, okay, well, actually, I need to start recording this. So I started creating questionnaires. So first I created questionnaires on Word, and I got people to look at the printouts and then look at the Word document and fill in on the Word document. I thought, oh, this is really inefficient. So I started looking around for another tool, and we started using Typeform, and that started collating the information. So it's actually iteration after iteration that I made my own process, my own data collection process. I made it better. And in doing so, as we implemented that, other people started seeing that it was getting more and more serious. So it started out as a meetup, actually.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it very soon actually became something that people just attended, and I think very recently, without really doing anything, our community is growing between 500 and 600 people if you accumulate, between the website and the, Facebook and LinkedIn and da-da-da. And what you get is actually people that are going to be interested in different things, and every person that attends might not be the one that you think is going to bring you that brilliant idea, but something that we have that crowdsourcing platforms don't necessarily have is this person-to-person connection. And in doing so, when we have a conversation with one of the participants, what ends up happening is that you're going to say something, and then Mara's going to say something, and then you're going to have a really great idea. And because we're sharing that with the community, the entrepreneur not only walks away with a report that we create, but actually walks away with a better feeling, a better taste of what people like, what people dislike, but also how to go about making the customer experience better, the onboarding process better, even the customer journey. It would make more sense for you to do this, this, and this. Well, why does that make more sense? And being able to have that conversation with somebody all of a sudden is a lot more inspiring. You used that word earlier on. It's a lot more inspiring than just looking at an Excel file and saying, okay, well, where do the patterns line up? How do I connect the dots?
Yeah, but on the other hand, for example, the profiles of the people who contact you in order to have the application tested, did you see an evolution? Bigger, smaller, complex, less complex?
So actually, that's a really good question, because the complexity of an application doesn't necessarily dictate the complexity of the questions that you can ask, in the sense that as soon as you start looking at the customer journey, whether you're a travel application, for example, or whether you're trying to solve a social problem like loneliness, for example, you actually realize that there are going to be themes that come back. Now, some of the applications that we have, so it's applications and websites and business applications, of course, but Testmyapp just sounds a lot nicer because it's short. And being able to take that macro view and to say, okay, well, because we spend a lot of time with the entrepreneurs beforehand to say, what is it that you're actually looking for?
Okay.
And we develop this rapport with the individual or with the individuals because we need to get to know them to understand what it is they're trying to get out of the event itself. Now, as soon as you start talking about why you're doing stuff, Simon Sinek, start with why. As soon as you're starting to talk about why, then people start to ask different questions. It's not, do you like this process? Yes, no. It's, why does this process make sense to you? Why does it make you feel like that? And then the conversation that you have after the event or during the networking phase of the event ends up being a lot more personal, a lot more connected than if you're only talking about results of hard facts of, okay, well, this green is better than that green, or whichever.
But how do you make sure that you always have the, let's say so, population at your event which is heterogeneous enough to bring all this input and, between quotation marks, a little bit to deliver this quality service to your clients which ask you to run such a workshop or such an event?
So what we've realized is that the people that come to our events as participants or people that ask us to organize events for them are actually quite a self-selecting population. Now, by self-selecting, I really mean that it takes a certain frame of mind to be open to criticism. So if you're constantly on the defensive and you're constantly saying, but I created this, you can't judge me because I've spent 17 hours deciding that that button is going to go there, and now you're telling me that it shouldn't? Well, yeah, because it doesn't make sense for it to be there. If your call to action, for example, isn't visible, or if it's the wrong color or whatever, the fact that you spent 17 hours deciding that doesn't matter. It matters that the consumer at the end will tell you, and he'll tell you, it's a bit like walking into a shop. If he doesn't walk into your shop, there's probably a reason why. So if he doesn't use your application, there's a reason why too. Now, by self-selecting population, we also put out the messages on internet saying, well, essentially, if you're interested in this topic, that topic, come to the event. If, let's say, you're not at all interested in traveling or exchanging your car or whatever it is, car sharing, whatever the topic, naturally you're not going to waste your time going to something that you're not interested in. And so we end up having sometimes rather passionate debates over things that are emotional, and that's where the benefit really comes out, is when there's a tiny bit of friction between the entrepreneurs and the participants, because if you just get yes men or yes women, it's boring.
But on the other hand, I mean, this is between quotation marks, only the event itself, the population and so on. But I mean, on the business side, you, as you said, you did it for yourself, and then you saw, okay, there's a need, and I mean, everybody has to pay. We have to pay our invoices, which we get sent. So how did you figure out that there's a product or a service? How did you go about it? Was it pure like testing, a trial and error, or?
So one of the big mistakes that we make as entrepreneurs is actually being afraid of sending out that first invoice. We think, what if he or she doesn't want to pay it? What if my service isn't up to the quality standards that everybody wants and needs? Well, the reality is that it's not about the number that's on the paper, it's about the value that you bring to them. Now, and by them I do mean the paying customer for us is the entrepreneur for who we organize the event. Okay. For participants, it's free. We spend time and energy, obviously, but we want to make our events as qualitative as possible by, having good beer. Thank you, Fox Beer, by the way. We really put nice food forwards in the sense that it's not just crisps. We're toying with the idea of having, proper meals and stuff like that, and that will come with the future. So what we've done, because we're talking about money anyway, there are actually several packages. If we don't, there's for startups, we've kept the price really low so that they can have access to the service. So there's actually a distinction to be made between the two packages, in the sense that the initial package is going to be what we call open, i.e. we put it out on the internet and anybody can come. If you're interested in the topic, you sign up. Hopefully you RSVP so that you know who's coming, and then you actually show up for the event.
This means you don't make a selection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, on the other hand, there's the private events whereby there's a selection process, and we will contact people individually within our network or people who know people that can introduce us to people, and we will spend a lot more time saying, okay, well, you need... One example that we had was one company that had designed an application that only worked on Slack and was specifically for project managers. Okay, so I had to go out and find not only project managers but project managers who use Slack. And so obviously there's me calling and spending hours and hours and hours, without necessarily exaggerating too much, finding the people, because we guarantee that there will be at least 10 people at the event.
Okay? With this profile and so on.
We try and keep it between 10 and 20 people so that the entrepreneurs can actually have a conversation with each one of them.
But the thing is, we have been talking about the invoices. The first client you invoiced, was it really the first event you did not for yourself, or was it a little bit later?
It was quite a bit later, actually. We've been running Testmyapp now for 18 months, going on nearly 2 years, actually. And in the beginning, because it was supposed to be just a thing that I did on the side, I didn't invoice because I wasn't expecting to get anything out of it. And it was only when, in fact, some of the entrepreneurs that are here tonight, that they started increasing their click-through rate and the conversion rate and being able to
get a result from it.
Exactly. So we were talking about value earlier on.
Exactly.
The importance of understanding what kind of metrics the entrepreneur is actually basing performance on is also a key for everyone being able to measure what you're actually placing value on, what is most important to you, will also help you determine, okay, well, what do I need to do to increase that performance? Now, if you start looking at a mobile app, for example, how many downloads are you getting? Okay, how long will people stay during the onboarding process, and how many people are you losing during the onboarding process? Let's take something very, very simple. If your onboarding process is too long, too complicated, you're going to, let's say your onboarding completion rate is only going to be, let's say, 25%. That means that you're losing 75% of the people during the onboarding process. Okay, well, if you're measuring that, and we can make the onboarding process maybe nicer, more agreeable, less complicated, and you go from a completion rate from 25% to, let's say, 50%, that means that we've already doubled the performance.
Yeah, that this thing is what I mean is, okay, an entrepreneur or company comes to you, says, okay, here's my app or my product or service, I would like to test it. You spend a certain amount of time to grasp what it is in order to get the best test bed which is there.
Yep.
What are your deliverables? How did they evolve? I mean, in the beginning, of course, I guess it was to gather some feedback, but then I suppose once there comes, as you say, this invoicing process, there are some deliverables which you have to agree before, or eventually you find out during the process.
Yeah.
But how was that? How did you go about that? How did you experience that one? That it more or less worked out? Let's call it like that.
So from the start, we knew that we had to spend, or that I had to spend time with the entrepreneur to get to know them on a kind of personal level, but also get to know their application on a personal level, knowing that it can be from the MVP all the way through to finalized product and actually already be on the market making money. Okay. Now, we have always had that from the start, being able to spend time with them. And then that's one of the deliverables, the preparation phase. The next deliverable is the actual event itself, so guaranteeing a certain number of people, between 10 and 20 people, providing the food, the drink, the venue. And then the next deliverable after that is going to be the report. So we collect all the data, we process the data, we to a certain extent, ingest it, to produce the report at the end, which is going to act as a roadmap of things that you can or should improve.
So the deliverable would be, in the end, let's say, after all, is a report with recommendations.
Yes.
And as is with recommendations were for the to be.
Yeah.
All right.
So by recommendations, obviously we're basing this on the feedback that we got from the users, but also from our own personal experience.
Yeah, but when you say personal, is it the experience from your previous business when you're doing it yourself, or do you, because nowadays a lot of products or services are, let's say, it's like the deliverable report, but in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the real gold is the data you are getting and then the intelligence you are gathering in order to get even better reports. Is that something, when did you find out that it was that a little bit also which was triggering everything in order to have once an advantage of your peers, which are offering a similar service, and also to have more quality service?
So, giving you a date?
No, not a date, but I guess you felt it at some moment.
Actually, no. I am gonna be fair, because it was quite funny because.
Oh gosh, I gave you an idea.
No. Well, you're always giving me ideas, but what I mean by that is that we did a kind of Testmyapp of Testmyapp. If we can say it like that, we're constantly telling people, well, this is what you need to improve. And at one point, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to have people tell me and customers tell me, well, we think that this is what you should improve. So if I'm going to be perfectly honest, it's listening to people's feedback that I was able to improve my offering. And in the beginning, I thought, hang on a minute, that means that not only do I have to organize this whole thing, but then I need to turn it into a report. And in the beginning, it was quite a fundamental change for me. And I thought, but that means a lot of work. And then I thought, well, if it's going to improve the quality of what we do and the quality of the deliverables,
it can increase. Yeah.
And now not producing a report sounds really dumb to me. So now we do it. And in the beginning, it used to take us 6 to 7 hours to actually produce the report. And now we can produce it in less than 3. So what we're doing is really trying to get more and more efficient with time, but also to ask better and better questions. Now, you asked me earlier on how we actually identified where we place the value. We're talking about invoicing. So where we place the value is, yes, of course, what I'm doing, anybody can do. It doesn't take me to do this, right?
It's not rocket science. Yeah.
It's not rocket science, exactly. Thank you for pointing out that I'm not a rocket scientist. Thank you.
No, we are in Luxembourg. We go to the stars, not building.
That's another conversation for another time. So what ended up happening was we ended up increasing, if you like, the quality of our questions. Doing away with some experimental stuff, like humor. We all like a good laugh, but when you're asking qualitative questions, if you insert humor into that, it doesn't have its place. It's fun, but it doesn't have its place. And that's one of the many, many things that we've changed. Now, as I said, anybody can do what we do, but we have been doing it for 18, 24 months, which means that now there are certain questions that we can ask that we know, even if you had not thought of those questions, we know that you're going to need the answer to get to that next stage.
But how, I guess also, as it's something which has developed and you get on a certain cruising speed, how do you have some ideas or do you think about scaling it?
Yeah.
In one or the other way?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, but thank you for that question, because we're, not only are we growing the company, we're growing the team. Really looking forward to the next month because we'll actually be able to talk about it. But being able to bring this mentality, this connection between people to other cities is something that not only are we excited about, but we're basing our business model on it.
Okay.
In the sense that because we're creating connection in a world that is all about internet, actually we're re-injecting the human side into human interaction. Now, obviously, it means that anybody could, listen to this and think, hang on a minute, I could do that. I encourage people, in fact, to reach out if this is something that you're interested in. We're constantly looking for people to take this elsewhere, and what we do is highly teachable. The tools that we use are highly teachable, and what we would like is to be in every single major city in Europe, and then So that's the mad plan, but
on this,
step by step.
Yeah, coming back a little bit. I mean, there are some aspects in this testing where you touch upon this human-centered aspects and also analytical aspects, data aspects, etc. How did you go about it in order to get the knowledge, the skills for it? Were you looking for an external assistant, or were you really trying to grow it internally by yourself for the time being, or with your partners? And so, how did you go about it?
The word that we like to use is organic.
Yeah.
So for the moment, we've grown organically, but I've been very, very lucky as well of being, certainly here in Luxembourg, everything is so open and people, organize fantastic events. And that's where you realize that you need to be open to learning in order for you to be able to move forward and give better quality and better value to your customers. Now, in the future, I know full well that I personally won't be able to answer every single one of those questions. That's why I think building a team around myself, because I don't want to be the center of the universe. I don't need to be. On the contrary, I would like to, I'm not wishing it, but I would like to be able to be knocked over by a bus tomorrow and for Testmyapp to carry on. Just purely and simply because it's a mind frame, it's a mindset. So actually being able to bring that to other people is something that I'm very interested in.
Okay. And the other thing is, for example, its scaling is, you go to other cities, you distribute, but scaling could also be increasing customers, the services. I don't know, if you do a report and there in the report there are some recommendations, you could also have a network of service providers who could fulfill these recommendations. Is that something which could all this, are you thinking about it, or would you say, let's wait a little bit, let's grow it first to get a footstep, and then we look how we can diversify the services and the products?
So I'm lucky enough, in fact, to be surrounded by amazing people, and I make that conscious effort of looking for people who, short, medium, and long term, will be able to add value to the community in general. It might not be even to me, not in the short, medium, and long term, but bringing these people into the ecosystem and within the gravitational field, shall we say, of what we're trying to achieve. Yes, there is space for service providers and companies and even individuals to contribute to that. It's also very important to build those trusting relationships that individual is not only going to be there for a one shot and then gone, because this is a long-term game. Quality is a long-term game, and what we're building is a long-term game. So, in fact, we're currently integrating Testmyapp into a larger consortium of companies, and there is going to be quite a bit that is going to change over the next 6, 12, 18 months. But fundamentally, Testmyapp is at the core is not going to change, in the sense that our mission will always be to help companies, whether they're startups or internationally renowned companies, to be able to provide better quality service and better quality applications and website to their customers themselves.
But that brings me to another aspect. One of the aspects is also the resources you needed from the beginning to here. From hearing, I would say you did bootstrapping, in fact. Or did you have external assistance with some resources? Because in the beginning, as you said, it was only for yourself, and then you did one step, one toe, then the other, and so on. Did you do it? How did you go about it? Because very often the resources are quite an issue with people who are starting, or entrepreneurs who have started, or companies who are running, but at some moment you have to deal with the resources in order either to move on or to grow, or I don't know what, or even to start itself.
Yeah, of course. Now, the issue, if you like, of available resources, I consider myself to be extremely lucky because I had the opportunity to do what I do. I love what I do, and that to me is probably the best present that I could ever have. Now, we were having this conversation actually earlier on about being able to be realistic about the cash timeline, and of course for every entrepreneur it's going to be different. There needs to be an honest conversation about what can be done, for how long, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to carry on with a certain amount of personal stress involved, etc., etc., etc. That's perfectly normal. Unfortunately, we would all like to be able to do only things that we like doing, but then this isn't, as I said, this isn't my only activity. I would like for it to be, but
but that's
there is a reality.
Okay, so but the other thing is coming to the other side from your clients. I mean, you were talking about the entrepreneur, or the one who is going to be an entrepreneur, who would like to test what he or she is thinking about developing or so. But that requires that there are entrepreneurs. I mean, how do you see it, or or are you confident that there will be enough entrepreneurs to use it? Yeah.
So the great thing about being an entrepreneur nowadays compared to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago is that when you say I'm an entrepreneur, people don't run away screaming. Okay? It used to be very, very difficult to actually have that mindset of it being perfectly acceptable for you to be an entrepreneur, but you can also be an intrapreneur. So this is something that I must admit, I personally took quite a long time coming around and being comfortable with the fact that there were certain people that I was going to have to turn down. If you can't pay for the service, well, I'm sorry, I'm not an ASBL, a non-profit. So as much as I can try and help you, put you on the right path, etc., etc. If I do that for every single one, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to be left with nothing.
Exactly.
So the honest conversation that needs to be had is that there are certain people that can pay and certain people that can't. One of the things that we're thinking about doing, we haven't actually done it yet, but if an entrepreneur can't afford to pay for an event or a series of events themselves, well, go and find yourself a sponsor. And if you're in a field that actually, interests a larger group, well, why not get them to sponsor what you're doing? You get them to sponsor a Testmyapp event. They get the benefit of maybe marketing visibility, but then they also get the benefit of being able to see what it is that you're doing. It needs to be win-win. I never created this for it to be, I get everything, you get nothing. On the contrary, if we don't set out in business, and certainly in the entrepreneurial mindset to actually want, it's all about intent, actually want for the other person to succeed, well, we're all going to be, left out in the cold.
But a little bit now, looking a little bit back what you have been saying and what we've been talking about, would you do something different? Not in another way, but differently.
You mean if I had a time machine?
Yes, or if you had the opportunity to do something different, is there something where you would say, okay, yes, definitely this I would address it in a different way? Are there some of these moments or issues?
I would stop worrying whether people are willing to pay for this or not. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes that I think everybody makes is worrying that people are not going to be willing to pay for what you perceive as valuable. Now, if they have any kind of value in what you're doing, then if they want that value, they should be prepared to pay for it. Now, of course, there are people that are going to see the value, but if you don't, and you don't make them pay for it, they're not going to tell you, send me a bill. They're going to say, okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day, and off you go. So actually getting customers to pay for it before would have actually allowed me to be where I am now. When you're asking an entrepreneur to pay, 950 euros for one event, one open event, and 1,500 euros for a closed private event, those are rock bottom prices just to make it accessible for the entrepreneur. And why do we do that? Because we benefited from the ecosystem and people's help, but we had to pay for people's help as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's in shares, whether it's in our own time, etc. But then when we speak with corporates, the prices start at between 3,000 and 5,000 per event. But why do we do that? Because the value that they get out of what we're providing is going to be a lot larger, because they're with their brand, with the reach of whatever they're doing is going to be much wider. So the small price difference that there is between both is actually expressed in the amount of value that they are going to get out of it. And I think one of the things that I wish I could change from the past is being blind to the value that I was actually bringing. And I think this is something that a lot of people, not just entrepreneurs, but also companies, are completely blind to. Start looking at the value of what you're bringing. And Simon Sinek, start with why. Why are people buying from you? Why do people keep coming back to you? Because you're providing value.
That's right. Maybe there are some questions or remarks, suggestions in the audience. Yeah, please.
Philip, you told us about your offer. How many are you in your firm? And you told me how many people are working in Stepping Stone. And can us a little bit about your figures.
So I hope you're not expecting me to say we're 150 people.
No.
Not yet. So Stepping Stone is one person, one active person. I've been backed by an investor that has very kindly supported me for quite a while. And in terms of Testmyapp, we've gone from 1 to 2. So technically we have doubled the capacity. What we've done, to talk about figures actually, thank you for giving me the opportunity, is that we used to do one event a month, and the objective by the end of 2018 is to get up to 4 events a month, so 1 per week. So that's already multiplying by 4. And by the end of 2019, and you were talking about scaling, is going from 4 to 8. And we're not only counting on Luxembourg. We're already in conversation with Paris, with Bologna, and with the whole of the Moselle region in France. So, it's always a question of, on the one hand, being sufficiently realistic to say, okay, this is something that I'm actually going to be able to do in the 24 hours in a day. But then on the other hand, you kind of need to keep that slightly mad streak of saying, okay, well, we are going to go that far. But then realizing that I don't need to be the center of the universe. Being able to delegate as well. It's not always easy, as one of us can tell.
Some other remark? Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Magdalena.
Just comment that because Testmyapp can sound can be very technical. Also, maybe some people who come think, yes, now we will measure. So we come to measure. We have a question, and there will be clear answer. You now in your speech you talk a lot about the human factor, and I really love it as human-centered designer. Because I think you said somewhere in between the lines that this is very human. Like when people can test. In fact, when you talk about the loneliness, for example, so they could really see how to deal with loneliness, how my product will answer this basic human needs also. So. And also, I think openness for feedback, that is something what we kind of lost somewhere on the way, because we have to show off who we are and how great we are and so on. So asking for feedback, you are basically bringing, I think, something very natural to the table. And
Thank you.
I hope that there is more and more people who will have courage to come and to be open to get other people's opinion.
Thank you very, very, very much. In fact, you're absolutely right. We live in an age where essentially we can access basically everything on the internet. And what we find harder and harder is having an open, honest conversation with another human being. And essentially, if I'm going to boil Testmyapp down to a few sentences, it's going to be being able to initiate a conversation between people and saying it's all right not to be absolutely 100% right. In fact, we encourage you to be absolutely wrong.
Exactly.
Because it's actually when you realize that you have got something to improve, that you do improve. If you get perfect scores all the time, is that really where you learn? Or are you going to learn when somebody tells you where actually you could improve this or you could improve that? It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you somebody that's able to improve. And that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Yeah?
In terms of clients who already went to Testmyapp, are there a lot of, what is the percentage between B2B and B2C application? I think it's good. I would be interested because I'm developing a B2B application and all of your suggestions and advices, I was like, okay, but maybe it's applying for B2C.
So one of the words that we like to use is agnostic, in the sense that actually it really doesn't matter who your market is, as long as you understand that they have got something to say. So, and I encourage us to have a conversation later on about what it is you're developing. But basically it's about the kind of questions that you're going to ask, because if you're developing an application or a website or a business application, theoretically you're going to be kind of solving a problem, and it's about understanding how solving that problem is going to help the individual or the company or the group of people, but also being able to have a conversation, because in the end, as Magdalena was saying, in the end, you're still talking with people, whether you're talking with businesses or consumers. Now, to answer your question about the proportion of B2B and B2C, for the moment, it has actually been mostly B2C, purely and simply because those are the opportunities and the people that have understood that they need to talk with their target market. Now, with what you just said, there is going to be an increase in the number of companies that realize that, hang on a minute, it's not just robots using my business application, it's people on the other end. And when was the last time that you enjoyed using a business application that didn't have an amazing UI UX? So it's not because it's a core banking system that it needs to look like absolute rubbish. On the contrary, if people enjoy using your tool, and I think, to not name names, but there are certain companies that do it a lot better than others. And there's a reason why you actually get people that are absolute fans of a certain type of tool, on the one hand, that have an amazing UI, UX, customer support, that put people first, people-centric, etc. And then on the other hand, people that are going to, companies that are going to be very, fact and, you need to put that information in that box and it doesn't look nice. The feeling that you get from using the tool, because that's what we're talking about in the end, is not viscerally engaging. It's not nice. It's not agreeable to look at. It's not agreeable to work with. It's not fluid. There was this one time I was having my windscreen replaced, and this is years ago. And so this was in France, and I remember the guy being really enthusiastic about being able to provide really quick really quick service. And you would pull in there, and in less than 20 minutes you were out. And one of the things that struck me was the speed at which his tool on his computer was working. Now, to Mr. and Mrs. Everybody, that doesn't sound like a really big deal, but how often have you sat in front of your office computer and the thing is going, please wait, please wait, please, and you're going nuts because all you asked it to do was print. Imagine the frustration that you have taken away when you're making these things like really quick, really smooth. You haven't fundamentally changed the way that your system works. You asked it to print, but what you have done is improve the experience that the individual has, the user has at the end. And that's something that we don't take into consideration, the feeling that people actually get out of using a tool, whether it's B2B or B2C.
If there are no... Yeah.
Yeah, at what stage do clients usually come to you? Is it more the wireframe or MVP or finished product, or even the concept before even wireframes exist to test the concept? And what is the difference to be expected in the feedback you get out of it, depending on the stage where you have this session?
So thank you very much for that question, because it's fundamental actually, because what happens is that our customers come to us when they're even pre-wireframe, and they can be as far as having 50, 60, 100,000 users. Okay, so we get everything in between. Now, we toyed around for quite a while with being able to charge people to test an idea, and that it kind of fell through, it fell through the gaps, because is there really a market? Are we going to make the marketing effort to say, well, come and have a conversation with us and we'll tell you how to get that off the ground? We chose to say, okay, if you've got an MVP, minimum viable product, or you're at any other stage of development, we can help you collect feedback. Now, one of the things that we have done with one of our clients actually is they were at the wireframe stage, and essentially it was just a clickable mock-up that they made on a free tool on the internet. So that was enough to actually get them to a stage where they could collect feedback. Now, if what you're looking for is to kind of test the waters and you want to see if people prefer this design or that design, that's also something that we can do. But then all the way through to a finished product, you can also be a customer. It's the questions and the quality of questions that we try and keep as high as possible, so that the individual can walk away with the results. We deliver them. We guarantee that we deliver that report in less than a week, because like that, it's still fresh, it's still actionable, and then they can give it to their developer, and then they can either implement or change with the implementation.
Yes, please.
Well, have you ever had to tell people their idea is complete rubbish, or what reactions?
So actually, you bring me to a really interesting point. A lot of the time that I spend with entrepreneurs is getting them to understand that it's not because somebody critiques what they've done that they are bad as a person. There's a market for pretty much anything, but whether you find that market or not is debatable. So I never berate people, because some people really do live, on another planet in terms of, what they think that people want. And essentially all we're doing is giving them, a gentle taste of reality. And sometimes if somebody's going to be really, really stubborn, of course you'll step up the tone and sort of say, look, you're being completely unrealistic. But then on the other hand, as we were saying earlier on, it's a self-selecting population. If you're not open to criticism, you're not going to come. It's as simple as that. So you need to be open, but you also need to understand that there is no failure. You either learn or you succeed. And that's it. And I think this is something that we need to improve in our own culture, of being able to say, okay, well, it's okay for me to try new things, and it's okay for me to not be 100% right all the time. And I think that's something that we need to change, not just as Luxembourg, but as even the European culture. And I think that's why so many of the biggest innovations can come from the other side of the, obviously in America, because just because they're not afraid of what everybody else is going to think if you do fail. Mm-hmm. And in the end, does it really matter? Did somebody pass? No, I don't think so. But anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, please.
As a startup that I've been a client from Philip, and I've been seeing the evolution for the past 5-6 months. To answer your question, you're not testing an idea, you're testing a product. So it's not the same thing, because the people can have the idea for you. You can change your idea, or actually you don't change an idea, you just evolve in what you're thinking, but it's people are there to test this product. We don't like this, we like this, we don't like this, we like this. And when you see some things that they say, and he was mentioning earlier about it's just popping up, and then you're like, okay, oh yeah, I should add this, I should add this. And most of the time, because it's your product and you have been working on it for many months, days, nights, so many things, sometimes people are like, yeah, you should add this. And it's something you already thought about, and you put it on your Trello or on your notes and say, I should add it when I have time. And then you say, okay, I'll put that on my priority list. And yes, and also something about people that come to this, it's like I say, it was a self-selection. I believe you're open to criticism, but you're also kind of not sure about what you're going, but you have a vision. It's like driving the road. If you don't know where you're going, Testmyapp not going to help you, because to help you choose or to evolve in your product, because it's about product evolution. It could be at the wireframe, it could be at 60,000 users. But you have to know where you want to go more or less. You have to have a vision. Say, okay, that's what I want to bring to my people. And then talking to people is like, okay, they're not going to tell you where you're going, but they're just going to tell you that there's a better way to go there.
The fundamental idea is being open, being flexible, and being sufficiently honest with yourself to say, okay, well, I'm going to be humble, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to what other people have got to say. It's not because they've said something that they hold the absolute truth, because we've all heard of brilliant entrepreneurs that didn't listen to anyone else and that ended up, succeeding massively. We can all spend hours and hours talking about Jobs, Steve Jobs, but fundamentally you need to be open to what other people are going to say. Because that's where the brilliance comes from. Some of the most amazing experiences that I've had during the Testmyapp events have been when, as I said earlier on, you have an idea, and then you have an idea, and then Mara says something, and then it can actually shift your way of thinking. And I think that's what you really get out of it, because you see yourself just from a different point of view. It's the occasion to sort of put yourself in the passenger seat on your own application, and say, okay, well, what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? And being able to accept that criticism was, eye-opening.
Thank you very much. What I would suggest is we thank Philip for sharing his experience.
Taking the time.